The president of Chevron subsidiary in Brazil, George Buck, is apologizing for the damage caused by a spill off the coast of Rio de Janeiro. But the apology for the oil spill that began earlier this month was a little too late. The government is poised to suspend the U.S. oil company's oil exploration activities there. Chevron says the leak has now been stopped, but an oil slick is still visible. Brazil says the company waited too long to respond to the leak and tried to cover up the true extent of the damage done to the environment. Chevron also faces tens of millions of dollars in fines. In the past, economic slumps usually had one positive side. Prices at the filling stations went down. But this year, they are rising, even though demand has stagnated. One reason is that new oil reserves are getting harder to find and tap, and that makes production more expensive. Offshore oil exploration carries great potential, but drilling carries great risk. Oil spills are in the headlines all too often.
Drilling for oil offshore is a high-risk business. Case in point is the BP oil disaster off the U.S. coastline in the Gulf of Mexico a year and a half ago. Millions of barrels of crude oil were released for weeks into the sea before the leak could be plugged. The world learned that even experts can be helpless when the earth is bleeding oil on the ocean floor. The Brazil leak puts the dangers back in the headlines. But production volumes show offshore wells are becoming more and more important. 5 million barrels came from offshore fields in 2009. In 4 years, that volume is set to double. The damage created from leaking wells has turned many people away from the idea of offshore exploration, but most people still want cheap sources of fuel and energy, which are only possible if supplies are plentiful.
For more, we're now joined by Claudia Kempfert, energy markets expert with the German Institute for Economic Research here in Berlin. Ms. Kempfert, offshore drilling can be dangerous, but it's profitable. Big oil companies seem to are willing to take the risk?
Yeah, because they have to, actually. Because on the one hand, we see that the demand is still rising on a global scale. On the other hand, it's profitable because above a level of an oil price of $80 per barrel, it's profitable, and we need to extend the supply. And because we see also that the cheap oil, so to say, from Saudi Arabia or other exploration fields are declining. So we need the deep sea oil in order to have the supply ready.
Now, crude oil prices have fallen recently, but gasoline prices remain high. Why is that?
Refinery capacity is very low. That is one reason. The other one is still that the demand is high, both for gasoline, but also in many cold areas. The oil for heating is also demanded, and this is the reason why we see also high gasoline prices, but demand still is very high.
Now, it seems that oil producers are having difficulty keeping up with the demand. Is enough being done to reduce our dependence on oil, and how much is natural gas helping?
Well, a clear answer, the demand is still too high. We didn't do enough in order to reduce oil demand drastically. We need to be more energy efficient, and we need to have alternatives, and the alternatives are not ready. Natural gas is one important component, that's right, but we also need to look for sustainable mobility concepts, reduce our demand on the mobility side, and also bring or have alternatives ready, and natural gas, of course, is the first choice.
Now, I have to ask, do you think that alternative energy sources will be able to replace oil?
It has to. They have to, because we really need to have alternatives ready. Natural gas also is scarce at a certain time scale, and we clearly need also biofuels, alternative fuels to have them ready.
Now, what role does Germany play in all this?
Well, Germany wants to be on the upfront of alternative energy. They want to be more energy efficient. That's a great goal. And if we are successful here in Germany, I think it could be a role model for the world.
All right, Ms. Kempfert, thanks very much for your insights.
Thank you.
We'll be keeping a close eye on the mass protests called for around 3 o'clock this afternoon, local time in Portugal. That's meant to be part of the 24-hour general strike today, called by the country's 2 biggest trade unions. We'll have more on that later. Stick around.